The scripture reading today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated.
I think some of the best news I've ever gotten in this building, in the church, was about a number of years ago, I won't say how long, I and about 6 other people were recruited to form a large singles group for the church. And that singles group grew to over 1,500 members. But the interesting thing about that is, in that group that was recruited to develop it, I met Sandy, my wife. So that was the best news I think I got in this building.
My grandma, she was in a hospital and she had lung cancer, so the best news I ever got is that she was going to be okay.
The best news I ever got is when we moved out here, we were not sure about what church we were going to, so when we finally decided on this church, we were very excited.
I think one of the things that early on, like 33 years ago or so, was finding out that I was going to be a mom. It's a very exciting time, and probably, I don't know, just one of the best moments that I can remember.
When I found out I got on to the Rockwood Swim Age Development Group, I was really excited.
The best news I've ever gotten is that we were having a little sister.
Well, other than the obvious of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, my daughter had a serious brain surgery and she came through that beautifully, and I guess getting those good results was probably way up there in the tops of all the best news.
Some of the best news I've ever gotten is probably when I got accepted to be a spirit camp leader for the first time. Not because like the news itself was great, but because of the memories and the family that I gained from that experience.
The best news I've ever gotten was on Christmas when we got a dog collar, so we were getting a puppy.
When I heard that I was going to have a baby sister, I felt excited but also disappointed because I wanted a baby brother.
When I was going to Florida.
The best news I ever got was passing nursing boards after a long, prolonged course of getting there.
When I found out I was getting a dog, I was super excited because I've been wanting one for like 3 years.
Last Christmas, there was this playset I wanted. It was a Mattel Jurassic World playset, and I really wanted it, and I got it, which is kind of like news for me because then I could have a lot more fun. Yeah, that was probably the best news I've ever gotten.
Well, the best news I've ever gotten is the birth of all 3 of our children. The first one was our daughter, Lisa. She was born in Keesler Air Force Base Hospital in 1969. I was in the nearby Navy base, and we always joked that it only cost $8.50 to have Lisa, because I was in the military, and that was for meals, and a pretty cheap price for a wonderful gal.
Yeah, good news. I am Andy Blacksher, and I am so glad to be with you today, and I'm so worried that I'm going to fall down these steps. So if you see me start to tumble, somebody say something, raise your hand, do something like that. It is an honor and a joy to be here with you today and to be one of your pastors here at Manchester United Methodist Church. I told the other service this morning that I have been hearing about Manchester since the very beginning when I first started getting involved as a pastor, and I would hear about Manchester this, Manchester that, Manchester this, Manchester that, Manchester this, Manchester that, and I'm telling you, it gets annoying until you're here. So I'm so honored and glad to be here. Those of you joining online, I'm glad that you're with us here as well. And this is the second sermon in the series that we started last week called This Is My Story, where we are walking through these ideas, coming at it from different angles of how do we tell our story. And not just our story broadly, but our faith story. It's that E word that we all wonder about every now and then. Some of us use better than others, evangelism. And I'm only going to use it one more time in the sermon, so don't worry if that sets you on edge. But it's about sharing our faith story with others. Today, the point is that we ought not to need to focus or worry as much about sharing it as much as we ought to be our story. So, I want to start this way. I want you to turn to someone near you, preferably someone that you don't know as well, maybe behind you, in front of you. Turn to somebody and tell them, what was the best thing that you've eaten this week? What was the best thing that you've eaten this week? I'll give you 1 minute and go. All right, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, what I know about you already, and I have learned about every other service that we've had here, is that you all love food. You don't mind talking about it. And that's a good thing. I wanted to show you my favorite thing. Now, this looks less appetizing on this screen than I meant it to. But I went to a local taco shop called, I'm going to butcher this again, El Toluco? Question mark? Yep, it's right around the corner, not far from here. Just keep going underneath the highway over here, underneath 141. It's on the right. And it is amazing. If you like authentic street tacos, there is nowhere else that you should try before you go there first. It was great. There's like 5 tables in the whole place. It's a wonderful spot. The picture looks better on Facebook, and I want to put this disclaimer out there real quick that if some of you have already added me on Facebook, that's fine. I'd love to be your Facebook friend, but just know I will never add you. So if anyone named Pastor Andy Blacksher adds you on Facebook, it's not me. It's one of those, yeah. So, but if you do, you'll see a much prettier picture than that. And I shared that picture earlier this week, and there was actually one person at least who took a couple other people, I think, and went and tried this place, and they agreed. So you've heard it not just from me, but from someone else. Those are good tacos. Sometimes it's a lot easier to talk about food, though, isn't it? So with evangelism, so often what we do is many of us, we have this extreme problem. Either we go way too big with it, bullhorn guy on the street corner, right, yelling at everyone about where they're going and or we go way too small. Sometimes maybe we don't even take the next step and even let anyone know about our faith life. We go way too big or we go way too small so often, or we overthink it. But it's simple, really, because the good news is supposed to be good news. This scripture passage today comes to us from the Sermon on the Mount, and if you remember Jesus and the way that he teaches, he walks through his life teaching his disciples along the way, but there's this one big section in Matthew in the 5th, 6th, and 7th chapters where he sits down with his with all of his closest friends on this mountainside, and he preaches this one big long sermon. Now, I've been to the place where this happened, and if you ever get a chance to go, you'll see what I mean. I hope you do. You'll see what I mean. It is not what I had pictured. I was picturing Colorado mountaintop, right? Jesus has climbed to the top, and he's standing up there on top, sharing the good news with everybody who's there, right? In fact, it was almost the exact opposite. So he's at the Sea of Galilee when this happens, and the Sea of Galilee is pretty low and very flat, and there's only a few hills on that side of the lake that are close enough that this could be probably the place that it was. There's a couple of spots in particular. One of them has a church on it that goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Beautiful spot. And take this one with you to trivia night. Today, on that hillside, where Jesus was probably down by the lake shore, speaking up the hillside to the people sitting amphitheater style, that whole hillside, full of banana trees. There you go. If you hear nothing else today, when you hear the Sermon on the Mount next, and you should hear it over and over, friends, remember the banana trees. So it starts at the beginning of Matthew 5 with the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes are Jesus saying, this is what life should look like if you are following me. And I know that it isn't always easy, but this is how it will be. And all of these things can happen to you, and you can feel all of these different ways, and life can kick you to the curb. And in the midst of that, this is how it should be with you. Know that you are blessed. Then after this section, there are the ethical teachings of Jesus, where Jesus goes through and he says, well, I know some of you don't read between the lines, and so I've always viewed this as question and answer. Like somebody posing a question from the audience, and then he kind of shouts out an answer. But chapters 6 and 7 are largely these line by line, well, Jesus, what about this? What about that? And he kind of takes it, and there's a paragraph or so at a time where he answers that. But in between, how it ought to be and feel, and how you are blessed, and all these ways that we ought to be living out specific commands and things, in between is this passage that we read about salt and light. In between is Jesus' teachings on how we are to be. Let's read that again. Verse 13 starts this way. You are the salt of the earth. I read that wrong. Hear it this way. You are the salt of the earth. Not you are somewhat like the salt of the earth, or you are similar to salt, or sometimes you're a little bit too salty. None of that. You are the salt of the earth. You skip forward a couple of verses, it's you are the light. You are to be the salt, to be the light of the earth. This is what it means to be a follower of Christ. So what are salt and light? Light, when I think of light, the first thing that pops into my mind is the sun, right? If it's not for you today, it will be tomorrow and the rest of the week, if the meteorologists are correct. Sun puts off heat. Sun gives light that produces energy that we feel as heat sometimes, or sometimes it produces energy that is used in other ways, solar energy that we can convert into electricity, or photosynthesis that the plants need to grow. And so they take in this light and they grow. And even if you're not a vegetarian, you need plants, right? Because something eats the plants and you like to eat that. So we need light in our life, or there is no life. Light illuminates things, and it shows them for what they really are. Light is the safety and the security that we need in the midst of the dark. That little night light that you have in the corner of the room is sometimes enough. Salt, for its sake, in Jesus' day it was a preservative, right? So they used it with food. We still do this too much. Use it for food to keep it longer than it was ever meant to exist in the first place. And then we eat it later. It also, in our bodies, does this miraculous thing where you have nerve endings all throughout our bodies, and they don't quite touch. They don't quite touch, and the thing that sends the impulses between our nerve endings well, we need salt in our body to make those connections. Electrolytes, you've heard of them. That's what salt does for us. You literally can't move a muscle without salt. Salt gives us life. I've also heard you can put out grease fires with it, and you can use it in some way to rub on a bee sting, and it makes it better. I have not tried that, but there's all kinds of things online that you can learn about salt. It also makes food taste better, only if you do it in the right amount, though, right? Not enough, and you wonder why you did this, and too much, and you just quit. So hear Jesus this way. When he says that you're to be the salt of the earth, one way you can hear him is I think he's telling us, without Jesus followers in life, this world, the earth, all of us together would be bland. Without Jesus followers in this world giving flavor to the earth, then this world would be bland. Or think of it another way with this question: what flavor are you bringing to the world? What flavor are you bringing to the world around you, to those who are closest to you, to those of us in this room or at work, or that you bump into at the grocery store, or that you try not to bump into on the road? What flavor are you bringing? Because friends, we are all tasting what you're making, whether you know it or not. That's what community is. And if we're not tasting it, we're smelling it. What flavor are you bringing to this earth? The good news is supposed to be good news. So I started going to the gym again a couple of weeks ago. Anyone ever started going to the gym and then gone back, started going to the gym again, and maybe done that more than just twice? I'm there again now. It's a good thing. And when you're in the gym, you bump up against people. Maybe not literally, but you hear them, right? So there's this guy on the exercise machine behind me in the area that I have kind of become attached to. And he has this tendency to talk a lot. He has a lot of opinions. He's not quiet. He talks a lot. I know a lot about this man's life. Been going for like 3 weeks. And he's in the middle of telling the story to the guy next to him. He just sits there quietly, bless his heart. He's telling this story to this guy, and what he says is, he's getting to the punchline, and he says, now I know it's not Christian of me, but I did it anyway. I know it's not Christian of me, but... Now, I'm not asking for a show of hands. I'm guessing we've all said things like this at some point, and it can be easy to use. So let's go back to verse 13 for a minute and talk about that. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything but thrown out and trampled underfoot. When we're following Christ, when we're putting his words into action, we don't do it sometimes. We don't do it part of the time. We do it every moment of every day, 24/7, because salt's properties are always fixed. External flavoring can wear off, but if we have salt, if we are salt from the inside, that salt flavoring that's inside us and always coming out into this world, it doesn't wear off. There's no, it wasn't very Christian of me, but. Now, this is the moment that we need to talk about spiritual humility. Spiritual humility is that moment where we stop ourselves before we start going a direction too strongly. And we say, is this really Jesus? Is this really me? Is there something more that I have to learn or hear or that I need in my heart today? These are the questions of discipleship when we slow down and say, God, what do you need me to hear today? Matthew 7:16 says that you will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns or figs? Guys, this is harder than it looks. Are grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles? No. Romans 8:6 says the attitude that comes from selfishness leads to death, but the attitude that comes from the Spirit leads to life and peace. There's no room for it wasn't very Christian of me, but. Your life is supposed to be and bear the good news at all times, in all ways, because the good news is supposed to be the good news. Let's look at verses 14 and 15. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under a bushel basket. Rather, they put it out on a lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. We have somebody in our midst who I hope doesn't mind me sharing a story about them this week. See, I don't know if you know Corrine Thompson, but I caught her this week as she was going about doing something that's above and beyond the duties that she already goes above and beyond. She's one of our financial volunteers. She helps out around the office, and she does more than that. She even comes in, and I found out, carries a bottle of clear liquid around the church. I investigated and asked her about that because I was wondering what it was that she was doing and what she was carrying. And she said, I was filling the candles. Have you ever noticed these things never get any shorter? Like they have been my eye level since I got here, right? It's amazing. And this candle stays the way it is because are you ready? It's not made out of wax. It's not made out of wax. It's actually, I can touch it. Can I touch it? Thank you, sir. This candle, it's hollow. It has inside it a receptacle, and that receptacle is where you pour the oil inside so that it will stay full. There's a reservoir of the oil so that the oil is in there. There's a wick that goes down through, draws the oil up. You know how this works. You light the wick, and then it gives the light for us. Imagine if you were in a first century home and you were lighting your house with a lamp. This is that lamp. I don't know when the last time was that the power went out at your house and you tried to light the whole house with one candle, but this is the story. This is the story we're in. They have one lamp that was in the house that was just a reservoir for oil, and there's one simple wick in it, and that's what gives light to the whole house. And here's why I point this out. Sometimes, friends, we get into this place where we say, you know what, the reason I don't share my story is because either I know what I've done or I know all of these things that surely are going to make my witness so far less impactful, or that it's just not that big. Surely God needs a bigger witness than that. So why try? Friends, you are the light. That is not the end of the story. You are the light. You are enough. So, what about you? How can you be the light of Christ in this world? The first thing is, you can only give away what you've got. You can only give away what you've got, and each one of us, no matter who we are or what we're going through or where we've been or what we know or have been taught or have done in this world, no matter if you're running a booth out here and you're the expert on a missions ministry, or if you came in for the first time today and you aren't willing to share your story in public because you're worried about how we would think about you. Every one of us needs the light of Christ in our heart in some way that we don't have it already. We aren't there yet. We need more light in our lives. And so, if you can't give away what you don't have, then where do you need the light today? Where do you need the light today? Where do you need the light of Christ in your heart, in your life today, in a new and a different way? If we don't have an awareness of where we need light poured into our own lives, then it's awfully hard to be the light of Christ in this world. And oftentimes I think when we start looking for more light in our lives, we think the answer is to go to the source, to find some flame that's already going, to go light it off of that, or go find a match or something like, let's get this done right now. But friends, sometimes when we need more light in our life, first we need to spend some time in the dark. Annie Dillard said it this way. She said, "You do not have to sit outside in the dark. If, however, you want to look at the stars, you will find the darkness necessary." Last story, I promise. A friend of mine was starting a church, and they didn't have a building, didn't have a lot of things, and so what he did is he spent an awful lot of time for his office, meeting people, writing sermons, all of those things in a restaurant. And over and over and over, many times a week, he'd go to the same restaurant, and he'd have the same waitress. And this waitress, as you do when you get to know somebody that you're around all the time, but it's, kind of cordial. They've got a job, you've got a job. They shared stories. They got to know each other. They built a friendship in some ways. He knew about her family and life and all of those things. Knew her story, and she knew some of his. One day, he ordered his food and said thank you, and she started to walk back to the kitchen. She got about halfway there, and then she stopped. She turned around and slowly started to walk back. She said, "I got a question for you." And she said, "Is there something wrong with me?" By the way, you want to stump a pastor, ask something like that. Oh. And his answer, he said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, you've been coming here for months, and I've been waiting on your table, and we've been talking, all about my family, about the things that I've done and said, and I've opened my heart up to you in ways I've not talked to so many other people. And I wondered if there was something wrong with me, because I know you're a pastor, but you've never invited me to your church." Friends, sometimes we go too big. But sometimes we're so good at being the salt and light in the world. Sometimes we're so good at being exactly what people need to see and need to know so that they know that Christ is present in a real and powerful way. Sometimes we can be living it out in the middle of a restaurant, and people know this is someone who represents Christ in this place. This is the kind of person I want to be around. But if we're that person and doing all those things, and we forget to make the invitation, you can be all the light you want to be, but if it's hidden under a bushel, So I don't know what you need to hear today, but hear this. Be the good news. Be the salt and light. But don't forget to share it. Don't forget to say something. What is it that you are serving up for this world? Do you taste like Christ? And remember that we all are called to be the good news for one another. And good news is supposed to be good news.